Add dynamic elements to brushes. Add dynamic elements to brushes. How to add dynamic elements to brushes? Add brush dynamics. How to add brush dynamics? The brush setting panel, by the way, provides many options for adding dynamic or changing elements to preset brush types. And for example, you can set options that vary the size and color and opacity of brush marks over the course of a stroke. And you work with two components when adding dynamics elements to a brush. And we have two options here now. Jitter percentage, we specify the randomness of dynamic elements at 0%. An element doesn't change over the course of a stroke, and at 100%, an element has the maximum amount of randomness. And second option, options in the control pop-up menus, specify how you want to control the variance of dynamic elements. And you can choose not to control the variance of an element and to fit an element over the specified number of steps, or to vary an element based on pen pressure, pen tilt, and the position of the pen thumb wheel or pen rotation. Note and be careful here please now. Pen controls are available only when you are using a pressure sensitive digitizing tablet such as the webcam tablet, and supported pens for rotation control and thumb wheel. And a warning icon appears if you select a pen control but haven't installed a tablet or are using a pen that is missing the control feature. So what about brush shape dynamics? Brush shape dynamics is meaning shape dynamics determine the variance of brush marks in a stroke. Like this images now. We have in the left side brush stocks without shape dynamics in the left side, and in the right side with shape dynamics, with and without. And size, what about size, jitter, and control? Size, jitter, and control specifies how the size of brush marks vary in a stroke. And for more information, see created modify brushes. And to specify the maximum percentage of jittering, type a number or use the slider to enter a value to specify how you want to control the size variance of brush marks, by the way. And then choose an option from the control pop-up menu. And so what's the meaning of off? Off is meaning specifies no control over the size variance of brush marks. And what's the meaning of fade? Fade is meaning fades the size of brush marks between the initial diameter and the minimum diameter in the specified number of steps. And each step, by the way, is equal to one mark of the brush tip, and the value can range from 1 to million. For example, entering 10 steps produces a fade in 10 increments. And pen pressure, and pen tilt, and the stylus wheel, and varies the size of brush marks between the initial diameter and the minimum diameter based on the pen pressure and pen tilt or position of the pen thumb wheel. And what's the meaning of minimum diameter? Minimum diameter is meaning specifies the minimum percentage by which brush marks can scale when size jitter or size control is enabled. And type a number or use the slider to enter a value that is a percentage of the brush tip diameter. And tilt scale is meaning specifies the scale factor applied to the height of the brush period to rotation when size control is set to pen tilt. And type a number or use the slider to enter a value that is percentage of the brush diameter. And what's the meaning of angle, jitter, and control? Angle, jitter, and control is meaning specifies how the angle of brush marks varies in a stroke to specify the minimum percentage of jittering and enter a value that is a percentage of 360 degrees to specify how you want to control the angle variance of brush marks, and then choose an option from the control bar menu. And what's the meaning of off again? Off is meaning specifies no control over the angle variance of brush marks. And fade is meaning fades the angle of brush marks between 0 and 360 degrees in the specified number of steps. And what about pen pressure and pen tilt and the stylus wheel and rotation? Its meaning varies the angle of brush marks between 0 and 360 degrees based on the pen pressure and pen tilt position of the pen thumb wheel or rotation of the pen. And what's the meaning of initial direction? Initial direction is meaning bases the angle of brush marks on the initial direction of the brush stroke. And what's meaning of direction? Direction is meaning basis the angle of brush marks on the direction of the brush stroke. And what's meaning of roundness, jitter, and control? Roundness, jitter, and control. Its meaning specifies how the roundness of brush marks varies is in a stroke. To specify the minimum percentage of jittering and enter a percentage indicating the ratio between the brush's short and long axis. To specify how you want to control the roundness variance of brush marks. And then choose an option from the control pop-up menu. And what's the meaning of off again? Its meaning specifies to control over the roundness variance of brush marks. And fade its meaning fades the roundness of brush marks between 100% and the maximum roundness value in the specified number of steps. And what's the meaning of pen pressure and pen tilt and stylus wheel and rotation again? Varies the roundness of brush marks between 100% and the minimum roundness value based on the pen pressure and pen tilt position of the pen thumbwheel or rotation of the pen. And what's the meaning of maximum roundness? Maximum roundness is meaning specifies the minimum roundness of for brush marks when roundness jitter or roundness control is enabled, by the way. And enter a percentage indicating the ratio between the brush's short and long axis. The brush's short and long axis. And so, what's the meaning of brush projection? Brush projection is meaning that it specifies that as you paint with a stylus, it changes to tilt and rotation alter the tip shape. And what about color dynamics brush options? Color dynamics brush options is meaning color dynamics determine how the color of paint changes over the course of a stroke. Like the next pictures now. We have in the left side brush stroke without color dynamics, and in the right side with the color dynamics, with and without. And what's the meaning of apply per tip? Apply per tip is meaning specifies changing color for each distanced tip stamp in a stroke. And if unchecked dynamic changes occur once at the beginning of each stroke, you can actually vary color between strokes rather than within each individual stroke. And what about foreground and background jitter and control? Its meaning specifies how paint varies between the foreground color and background color, and to specify a percentage by which the color of the paint can vary, and type a number or use the slider to enter a value, and to specify how you want to control the color variance of brush marks, and choose an option from the control pop-up menu. And what about off again? Off is meaning specifies no control over the color variance of brush marks, by the way. And what about fade? Fade is meaning varies the color of paint between the foreground color and the background color in the specified number of steps. And what about pen pressure and pen tilt and stylus wheel and rotation? Its meaning varies the color of paint between the foreground color and the background color based on the pen pressure and pen tilt position of the pen thumb wheel or rotation of the pen. And what about hue jitter? Hue jitter is meaning specifies a percentage by which the hue of the paint can vary in a stroke, and type a number or use the slider to enter a value, and a lower value changes the hue while maintaining a close proximity to the hue of the foreground color. And a higher value, by the way, increases the difference between hues. And what about saturation jitter? Saturation jitter is meaning specifies a percentage by which the saturation of the paint can vary in a stroke, and type a number or use a slider to enter a value, and the lower value changes the saturation while maintaining a close proximity to the saturation of the foreground color. And a higher value, by the way, increases the difference between saturation levels. And what's the meaning of brightness jitter? Brightness jitter is meaning specifies a percentage by which the brightness of the paint can vary in a stroke, and type a number or use the slider to enter a value, and a lower value, by the way, changes the brightness while maintaining a close proximity to the brightness of the foreground color. And a higher value increases the difference between brightness levels. And what about purity? Purity is meaning increases or decreases the saturation of the color, and type a number or use the slider to enter a percentage between 100, -100 and 100. At -100%, the color is fully distributed at 100%, and the color is fully saturated. And what about transfer brush options? Transfer brush options is meaning transfer brush options determine how paint changes over the course of a stroke. Like the next image now. We have the image in the left side is meaning brush strokes without paint dynamics, and in the right side with dynamics, with paint dynamics, with and without. And what about opacity, jitter, and control? Its meaning specifies how the opacity of paint varies in a brush stroke up to, but not exceeding the opacity value specified in the options bar to specify a percentage by which the opacity of the paint can vary, and type a number or use the slider to enter a value to specify how you want to control the opacity variance of brush marks. Choose an option from the control pop-up menu. And what's the meaning of off? Off is meaning again specifies no control over the opacity variance of brush marks. And what's the meaning of fade? Fade is meaning fades the opacity of paint from the opacity value in the options bar to 0 in the specified number of steps. And what's the meaning of pen brochure and pen alt and stylus wheel? Again, varies the opacity of paint based on the pen brochure and pen alt and or the position of the pen thumbwheel. And what's the meaning of flow, jitter, and control? Again, its meaning specifies how the flow and paint varies in a brush stroke up to, but not exceeding the flow value specified in the options bar. And to specify percentage by which the flow of the paint can vary, type a number or use the slider to enter a value to specify how you want to control the flow variance of brush marks. And then choose an option from the control pop-up menu. And what's the meaning of off again? Its meaning specifies no control over the flow variance of brush marks, by the way. And its meaning fades the flow of paint from the flow value in the options bar to 0 in the specified number of steps. And what's the meaning of pen brochure and pen alt and stylus wheel? Its meaning varies the flow of paint based on the pen brochure and pen alt or position of the pen thumbwheel.